Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 96. We are back again and we have another fantastic guest, a returning guest this week again, who I will introduce you to in a minute. But first of all, I will introduce the usual hosts. Mr. Peter Lant, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. That's all I've got to report this week.
I was going to say the beard is getting bigger. The strength is going up. The beard is getting bigger.
It is. I've tweaked me back yesterday though, so I'm off training at the minute. Hopefully till next week.
Well, lifting a stone, really.
It was doing pistol squat, but it's one of those things when it happens, you're like, oh no, and then now I can't even pick up a bell, but I can go walking still, which is good.
And I've seen you doing a lot since we had Tom on the other week. I've seen you doing a lot more of the Indian clubs out in the lovely gardens and things around where you are. You know,
that's my garden.
Yeah, well, I can see the houses behind. I can see the that's
the row of houses I live on.
Yeah.
But it's great. But the reason why I've done that the last couple of days is because so this is one of the things that goes with when people say, oh, I'm injured, and say, yeah, but you can still do stuff. So I still go walking, been out for a couple of hours with the dog today, and then like just doing Indian clubs because it's good for your mind and all that, and like it helps me move and it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Whereas other things, if I did them at the moment, would hurt. So I'm staying away from that for the next couple of days. You know, it's nothing major.
Like
it's just
that's a good lesson though. You can always work around niggles and tweaks, can't you? It's not, a lot of people see it as an immediate reason to, oh no, can't do anything, not going to do anything now. So you can always find a way around and do something.
I was thinking about it. The old me would just be like, I can't do anything, so I'll just eat more and then I'll just drink through it or something. You know what I mean? Just say, oh, sorry, I can't do anything today, so I'll have a couple of beers tonight because I don't have to do it tomorrow, and and that the old me would do that. Whereas the new me is like, no, keep moving.
Excellent. And Mr. Paul Bassett, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, not bad at all. Just extremely busy and no injuries at the moment, so that's good. I seem to have recovered from my bicep injury, so it's like you say, you just got to be persistent, really, and just find a way around it. Otherwise, as soon as you start pushing yourself, you're always going to find some niggle, particularly if you're like me, who's had years of injuries and you've got some joint. You flexibility issues and things like that. You've got to keep going, find a solution to it. Don't get too downhearted by it, and just find another way to express that kind of passion that you have, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, really good. And this week we are rejoined by Mr. Owen Hutchins from My Vital Metrics, or My Vital Metrics, yes.
Absolutely.
It's just, I just looked because he's got the sign behind him. My Vital Metric or My Vital Metrics, My Vital Metrics. Now, before we start, I just want to kind of, similar to when we had Chris Zaremba on last week, Owen is a returning guest. So if you haven't listened to the first episode we did with Owen, I'd highly recommend you go all the way back to episode 68, which was called The Importance of Assessment with Owen Hutchins, okay? Go back and listen to that one, because in that first episode, we really talk about kind of Owen's background and what led him to set up the clinic that he has in London, and what led him down the path he's on. And we also talk in quite a lot of depth around some of the health assessments that Owen does, which I've been to myself, and a number of my clients now have been see Owen for some of the health assessments like DEXA scans and 3D body maps. Since the last time we spoke to Owen, I've been back to see him and redone the DEXA, and I've also done the resting metabolic rate with him as well. But if you haven't listened to episode 68 with Owen, I'd highly recommend you go back and listen to that first, and then come back to listen to this one, because we're going to be talking about something slightly different today. We'll probably go back and touch on some of the stuff from the first episode, and some of the experience I've had and my clients have had go and see Owen, but we're going to be talking about some other kinds of assessment today as well. So how are you doing, Owen?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yeah, it's lovely, sunny. Well, today is not so sunny, but my window is up there, which is why I occasionally look up. But yeah, but no, it's been nice and warm. Can't complain. It's been a lovely June.
It's lovely in London. I mean, I know when I came to see you, I think it might have been maybe towards the end of May. Again, I can't remember, but I think it was May. And going up to London, see you with that. Is it Finsbury Circus you're on?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you got the big park in the middle and the sunshine. And London is a beautiful place in the sun, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Fantastic. So Owen, what we're going to talk about today is maybe we talked generally around the kind of the importance of tracking and assessment last time you were on. And we talked about the types of assessment that you offer, and also the types of assessment that people may be more familiar with, such as, home scales and, home body fat readers and BMI and all these kind of things. And we talked about how they compare to kind of the DEXA and the things that you use. But then today we're also going to look at a kind of a separate arm of what you do as well, which is more performance testing and performance assessment for people who are maybe interested in specific sports and things like that. So to begin with, do you want to kind of go through the kind of, I suppose, the menu of things that you actually offer? And you can go back over, mention the DEXA and stuff again, but then the kind of the performance type things that you offer, and then we can maybe ask questions and delve into some of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, like when there's kind of two branches, if you like, or two ways of thinking about our services. Obviously, there's a lot of the stuff that we talked about last time is about taking control of your health, trying to kind of optimize your body composition or bring it back into a healthy range. But actually, and using, of course, the DEXA as a good indicator of how that's going. But on the performance side, actually, one of the first general use performance things is also the DEXA, because in any sport that you're playing, there is going to be some, well, I can't say any sport, but in most sports that you play, there's going to be some element of what is your composition. Are you having to currently carry around weight that you don't need? Versus are you carrying around weight that's actually doing a lot of good, that's helping you with your power, that's helping you with your strength, that's helping you with your endurance. So for those who are coming in kind of thinking about performance, of course, the DEXA is also an incredibly valuable tool. And then, of course, we've got kind of the big daddy of performance metrics, which is the VO2 max test. So this is a ramped test that you can kind of do on a bicycle or on a treadmill. That's what we offer as standard. We have had someone bring their own rowing machine, and we've done it on that as well. But fundamentally, we're talking about a cardiovascular based test where we ramp you up from resting right through to your anaerobic threshold, a little bit beyond, and then we kind of wind you down. But that's it's a graded ramp test, and ultimately what we get out of that is a whole lot of data, not only about your overall level of fitness, but how your fitness changes as you go up through the intensities. So how efficient you are at burning different types of fuels at different intensities, and what that might mean about your training in the past, what it means about the kind of the energy production and your in your body, and what we can kind of then of course do for the future to change that. So yeah, so that on the performance side, that's the two things. And I'll just quickly sort of say, of course, on the for the resting metabolic rate, that goes kind of not hand in hand with, because once again, the resting metabolic rate is more a health metric rather than a performance metric, but really, really critical to understanding just how many calories you need to get by in the day. And the only difference is that when you take it from a health perspective, and for someone who's trying to bring their composition to a leaner state, then of course it's about putting a cap on those calories. When we're talking about sports people, it's frequently, are you eating enough to support your training, to support your performance? So, you know, this the same kind of test, but obviously taken with two different contexts.
Can you? Oh, sorry, go on, Paul.
I was about to say, no, a ton of questions on that. It was interesting because I think one of my trainers came to see you, Frantisek, after he did our 12-week transformation program. He got a fantastic result and he came back about 9% body fat. What was interesting actually was just seeing the seeing your calorie kind of targets for him based on his scan, and the allocation that you gave him for his activity. And he was doing a 5-day week, fairly intensive strength training routine with sprinting and with a lot of what we call muscular cardio, so stuff that really raises your heart rate. So you do work really hard. And then he was lifting pretty heavy weights at the end of the program.
Yeah.
But seeing, I mean, he had quite a high calorie, he was over 3,000 calories, but the allocation that you gave him for the activity itself was interesting, because you see a lot of people when they're kind of hacking their diet, they kind of allocate like 700, 800 calories for the activity. And you only gave him around about 350, 400, or I can't remember the exact number. It wasn't as much as you'd think. Why is that? Why is the actual activity level calorie kind of demands quite low relatively to what most people expect?
Yeah, so I mean, what we have to remember with our exercise is that, you know, we are, you know, walking around, you know, sitting up, standing up, sitting down, you know, just generally going through everyday activity for up to 16, 17 hours a day. You know, we are breathing and our heart is beating and our brain is functioning for 24 hours a day. So relative to those massive chunks of energy, you know, an hour a day, no matter how intensively you're working, can't really kind of compete when it comes to the overall burn. The other thing is that, you know, we allocate according to what somebody's goals are. So if somebody, you know, if on your kind of fitness watch or whatever, it has sort of said to you that you've kind of burned through 700 calories, if, you know, there's stuff about the accuracy of those figures, but let's assume for a second that that's true. That isn't necessarily 700 new calories that has come out of stores. That is 700 calories that might have been rediverted from other body systems. You know, your body's made economies elsewhere, you know, and then of course some of it will come out of stores. So if somebody's aim is to kind of lose weight or to continue to get leaner, we've got to be very careful and judicious about how we allocate those calories. And, you know, because intensive exercise, you know, it's very unpredictable as to what calories will be coming out of fat stores, for example.
I was just going to ask about the VO2 max test. First of all, in a second, if you can actually just explain in sort of layman's terms what the VO2 max is actually testing in a minute. But the other thing I was going to ask was, is the VO2 max test kind of exercise specific? So, for example, a runner would do the VO2 max testing with you, maybe on the treadmill. A cyclist would do it on the bike. And like you said, you've even had someone maybe who predominantly, I presume, was a rower or an indoor rowing athlete would come in and use the rower. And we obviously hear a lot that kind of, you know, specificity of exercise and things like that. So do you encourage people to do the VO2 max test on a piece of equipment that most mirrors their kind of main mode of training? Is that kind of how it would work?
Absolutely. So and the way, so fundamentally, until you get really specific with, you know, kind of Olympian athletes and others, the actual VO2 max theoretically shouldn't be different, you know, as far as your production. So in layman terms, what the VO2 max is, it's about how much oxygen your body can take on in order to meet its energy needs per minute and per kilogram of your body weight. Okay, so when we, anytime we're doing work, from, even if that is at rest, so we're just kind of sitting down, but our brain is functioning, our heart is beating, we're breathing, work is being done, and this is where the resting metabolic rate kind of comes in. And we know that as a fixed fixed figure, for every calorie of work that the body needs to do, it needs 207 milliliters of oxygen to kind of process the energy for that. So as our exercise then starts to ramp up from rest, we start to increase. As our power output and the wattage kind of increases, we're requiring much more energy from the body. So the body is now, you're breathing a lot harder so that you can take in more oxygen, and you're taking in more oxygen so that it can kind of complete that work. Now, as you're working towards your peak, there is only so much oxygen your body can actually take on. And we're not talking about lung capacity here. We're talking about, because when you breathe in a bunch of oxygen. When you breathe out a bunch of oxygen as well. And the difference is what your body's been able to absorb in that short period. So the stronger your engine is overall, the more accustomed to higher levels of work and activity your engine is, the more oxygen your body can kind of absorb per minute. And that is fundamentally what the VO2 max is. Sort of, it's the volume of oxygen that you're taking on when you're doing maximal amounts of exercise, per kilogram of your body weight is how it's then calculated.
So would VO2 max become more relevant? Is it more relevant for someone who is doing a sport that requires a level of conditioning? So say like football, endurance activity, rowing, versus a power who's doing 5 reps, 3 reps, 1 rep, something like that. Is it more correlated to those kind of sports that take place over a longer period of time, longer duration, higher intensity for time, versus something that's like 1 rep max, something like that?
Absolutely, it is. So when we're talking VO2 max, we are effectively testing how your body goes from its aerobic system, so that is the generation of energy in the presence of oxygen, and it transitions over time, as you get more intense, into an anaerobic system, so a system whereby you're generating energy without the need for oxygen. Now those power sports that you're kind of talking about, powerlifting and things like that, which are those operate almost entirely without oxygen. So the VO2 max isn't really a relevant metric for them. I mean, it might be interesting, but fundamentally, it's not going to help with their strength.
And you get given and the VO2 max is a score, isn't it? And a kind of a number.
Yeah.
And what is and I presume, obviously for elite athletes, and there may be things like elite cyclists, maybe who do you find, or from the literature and science and things, who tends to have, or who has the highest VO2 max as a population of sports people?
Yeah, so cyclists are classically very, very high. Rowers are classically very high. Cross-country skiers are incredibly high VO2 maxes. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about all of these kind of intensive cardiovascular-based endurance sports. Of course, runners are high as well, but there is a lot of other stuff going on with running beyond just the VO2 max.
So how much is nature versus nurture then? So it's because are people born with a higher VO2 max, or is it something that's developed?
So some people definitely are born with a higher VO2 max, absolutely, and a big part of it is definitely nature. But that said, it can absolutely be trained. at the top end of all of these sports, you could absolutely make the case that these people are born, and then conditioned appropriately, and that kind of holy combination has kind of led to be what they are. But everybody can kind of train their VO2 max. So if it is the score that's of interest, I mean, for personally, I kind of think, okay, the score is sometimes interesting. Sometimes someone will kind of finish a test and they'll come out with a score that really does blow my mind, and that in itself is interesting. But far more interesting is seeing kind of what has happened on the way there. How are they using their fuel, and from that we can kind of tell a lot about how they've been training in the past. What's been the nature of their training? Are they trained at all? Are they training only in the lower zones? Are they only training? Some people only train in the higher zones. Some people, particularly people who go for kind of class kind of formats which are very intensive. They will start the class and then they're straight up, and it's kind of intervals all the way. It's so they take themselves to their max and then they exhaust themselves, they rest a minute and they do it again. And it's very clear to kind of see those athletes that train that system versus those who kind of spend a lot of time down in the lower heart rate zones.
Yeah, because we had Phil Maffetone on the podcast in the past, and so we've spoke a lot about kind of this low intensity, steady state kind of keeping your heart rate fairly low and training the aerobic zone and things like that. So I suppose depending upon what you would see in the VO2 max test, in the way you were ramping up, you would be able to recommend to someone the kind of the zone or the area that maybe they need to work on improving. Like you said, if people are purely doing this kind of maybe high intensity interval training stuff and they're working right at the top level of their kind of heart rates and things, maybe they've got a more poorly developed sort of aerobic system at the lower end that they can work on, because obviously for long distance, endurance things like triathlons or ultra runners and things like that, they really want to develop that kind of lower level aerobic kind of base a bit more, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And what this comes down to, and you can kind of see this in the graphs that we produce, and what we do is, so it's a graph at different heart rates as your heart rate is going up, and it kind of shows you, okay, how much of your energy is coming from carbohydrate burning at this point, and how much is coming from fat burning. And the classic kind of pattern is, at the lowest intensities, from rest, it's primarily fat, and the fat bars over time decrease and the carbohydrate bars over time increase. But sometimes you've got fat burning and then it falls off a cliff. So beyond a certain point, your fat burning just almost turns off. And that's if that's at a point well before the person's anaerobic threshold, they should be able to continue to burn fat, but because they've not trained in that zone, their body's just not very good at it yet. And that once again is something that absolutely can be trained, and that's a clear marker for us that sort of says, right, your fuel utilization really drops off a cliff here, which means that, and from a performance point of view, that means if you're running a triathlon, if you're operating at that slightly higher level, the amount of extra fuel that you need to be taking on in terms of gels and whatever else kind of goes through the roof. Like if you're better at burning fat, and half your energy is coming from fat, it just saves you from all of that kind of stuff. If you're running a marathon, it delays that hitting the wall. Sometimes delays it to long enough that some athletes never hit the wall, because they're burning through enough of their own body stores of fat that they never really, with minimal kind of carbohydrate ingestion during a race, they can kind of get through.
Do you ever get athletes who are very high level in terms of their achievements with a very low VO2 max?
Um, for endurance sports, probably not. It's pretty well correlated to performance. You know, the literature, you know, the more kind of a sport is well, the longer a sport is to start with, and then the more it is based on this kind of endurance and energy production over an extended period of time, performance becomes very well correlated with a VO2 max score. That's not to say that that's the only thing. You know, sometimes we do find the reverse. You know, someone's performance is not good, or you know, they feel could be a lot better, but their VO2 max is extraordinary. You know, so the engine is working, and you know, what we're doing at the moment is we're just kind of looking into how we can look at other limitations that could be kind of going on. So sometimes, let's say for a sport that, and this comes back to the modality of the VO2, some sports like cycling, very, very intensive on specifically, you know, the quads. So, you know, if your oxygen delivery and your ability to utilize oxygen at the muscle cell in the quads is poor, it doesn't, you know, your engine might be pumping out all of the oxygen that you need, but if your muscle's ability to take it on is impeded somehow, then you know that could kind of affect your performance. So yeah, we're looking at how we could potentially do that in the future, but yeah, there are instances where the correlation breaks down. Absolutely.
What would impede a specific muscle group then? You know?
Yeah, so once again, one of the things is genetics. So if somebody kind of comes along and they are someone who's just naturally, let's say in their quads, born with a very high percentage of type 2 muscle fibers, so fast twitch, anaerobic muscle fibers, that muscle's ability to utilize oxygen, unless they kind of train them accordingly, will be pretty limited. You know, so you know, that kind of athlete, we might sort of suggest, you know, if that was the case in their legs, then okay, maybe you might want to think about shorter sprinty type races rather than the long aerobic type.
I was just going to say, you wouldn't necessarily, so someone like Usain Bolt wouldn't necessarily be able to be a good Tour de France cyclist, you know, because his event is a 10-second event,
right,
and he's built for a 10-second event. And then to go into a month-long cycling event is totally not how he's built, probably from a you know, genetic and you know, biological point of view, and from a training point of view as well. You know, so
absolutely, every muscle fiber would rebel against that. You know, you know, it would be an interesting test.
On his legs really long as well. He'd need a penny farthing, wouldn't he?
Carbon fiber one.
Yeah.
Do me. So no, that's can I ask from a practical point of view, because this is something that I don't do a lot of aerobic or cardiovascular in any kind of stretch the imagination exercise. I do a couple of sort of 45-minute indoor cycling sessions a week. I do a moderate amount of walking. I have done sort of marathon running and stuff in the past, but not for many years. So if I was going to do a VO, I'd be quite interested actually, maybe next time I come back, to do a VO2 max test, just to see, you know, with in almost not an untrained state, but certainly an unspecifically trained state, just to see what my VO2 max was. How long does a VO2 max test last? I mean, is it dependent upon the fitness of the person? And if you can push them very, very hard, does the test last longer, or are they a set duration when you do them? How does it work?
Yeah, so our protocols, you know, we'll absolutely try and get everybody there within 20 minutes. The aim of the protocol is to get you there slowly, you know, so there's no point me sort of saying, right, you know, let's put this on a ramp and go. You know, we want to be collecting data all along the way, at 90 beats per minute heart rate, at 100, at 105, at 110, and so we need to be allowing someone to spend at least 15, 30 seconds in each of these heart rate zones. But generally speaking, within 10 minutes, I've got a fair idea of how this is going to go. At that stage, I kind of what I'm looking at is the respiratory exchange ratio. So this is a figure that kind of tells you how the ratio of oxygen being taken on by the body versus the carbon dioxide being expelled. Now, that starts usually at rest, maybe around 0.69 or 0.7, and it gradually makes its way towards 1. If 10 minutes in we are at 0.85 and we're not really getting much beyond that, then I'll need to start cranking it up faster, because we need to get somebody to that 1. 1 means is effectively the ventilatory threshold, which is our it's basically the anaerobic threshold. So that's what we need to get people to, and we'll just try and make sure that hopefully within 15-16 minutes or so, then everybody kind of gets there. Of course, if you even with moderate amounts of exercise, you kind of escalate towards that sooner, it might be sooner in completely untrained individuals. Occasionally we have had some people kind of come in who are required to come in for their job. Sort of sometimes the police will send us people, things like that. So often people are not, who are doing a VO2 max are not trained at all. They're not, but they're just required to kind of get a score, and it doesn't need to be terribly high. It just needs to be beyond a certain level. And those kind of people, will obviously get a score. It's it's average. It's good for the population, but it's not kind of we're not really having to push it.
Do you need a relatively not low? No, if you had a massive amount of muscle mass, that's going to negatively affect your VO2 max, because the ability to deliver oxygen to those muscles will be challenged just by the sheer amount of muscle. So you're looking at populations like who have very high power output relative to body weight, hence cyclists with very low levels of muscle in the upper body and high levels of muscle in the lower body.
Yep.
Also high.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to remember that VO2 max is a score per kilogram of body weight. So if someone kind of comes in, let's say they're a power lifter, and they are, I don't know, 130 kilos, it is going to be, although in raw terms, their ability to take on oxygen might be all right, as soon as you divide that final score by their weight, it's probably going to turn out something fairly abysmal. In those instances where I've had police come in who have been required to reach a certain level, but maybe they were very unfit and carrying some excess weight, and they didn't meet the criteria. This was the fundamental thing. They kind of came and they did the VO2 max. They did not meet the criteria that they needed to meet. The action plan was simply lose weight. Drop 10% of your body weight, and your VO2 max will go up 10% from the maths alone. Your ability to then, of course, generate oxygen may also improve, maybe another 5%. So, and that might have been enough to kind of get them over the line for the next test. So, yeah. But to your point, more weight, the raw score of the VO2 max is going to be very difficult to get high.
And you mentioned to me, I think you maybe kind of alluded to it a minute ago when we were talking, when I came to see you, you mentioned this kind of potential test that can measure individual kind of muscle groups and things like that. That's kind of what you alluded to earlier when you said about, you may actually have a very good engine, but the actual individual limbs or whatever, or muscle groups may not be able to uptake the oxygen and utilize it and stuff like that. And that's some kind of new test that you're looking at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's this technology out there called NIRS, which is near infrared spectroscopy, which is effectively sensors, little kind of infrared. They shoot out a little infrared signal, and they have receivers back in it that kind of takes a picture of what's happening at the muscle live. So it's a sensor. It sits literally on the muscle itself, and it's just reading back via Bluetooth to what's happening. And what it's looking at is the concentration of oxygen in that muscle. So it's the SMO2 is called. So skeletal, it's just the amount of oxygen that you got it. And so it's an athlete's ability to desaturate a muscle is really important to their overall ability to kind of use those, especially in something like cycling. So we've got the kit, we're testing it out. There's some really interesting papers out there on SMO2 and on using NIRS to do it. We've just got to work out a protocol and something that's going to give somebody like good actionable insight before we release it, because these graphs are really, so basically it's like someone starts to cycle and you kind of watch their oxygen level in the muscle drop, but then every single angle, the level at which it drops, and then the level that it stays when it's down, and then how quickly it comes up, and then what happens then, every single angle has got an explanation, and it's super complicated. So try to kind of work that out into something that an athlete can digest and take away some action points. That's kind of our challenge at the moment.
So
but it's exciting stuff.
Can you take an athlete and say, in order to perform highest, you need to be this % body fat and this amount of muscle mass. So you can say that that's going to be a very high performing version of you based on the sport that you're doing.
With the totality of tests that we've got, I think we can kind of make a pretty good stab at that. But it's not universal, so I do get many endurance athletes, triathletes and things, and they come along for a DEXA, and their expectation, endurance, ultra runners is a classic one. Their expectation is that I'm going to say, you need to be dropping to 10% body fat, 8% body fat, whatever it happens to be. Now that may be the case. I think it's unlikely that I would ever suggest an athlete go that low, but everything then comes down to what fuels they're burning in their VO2 max. Like if they're really, really good at burning through fat, as a great fuel source at a relatively high intensity in their VO2 max, and that's what the test shows, then the benefits of losing that 1 or 2 kilograms of fat, and all of the pain that they would probably have to go through in order to do that, and the risk that the body then downregulates its kind of ability to use fat because you've only got a little bit there, I think is probably not worthwhile for that athlete. For the sake of a couple of a kilo or two, of fat, because that's all we're talking about for people who are already kind of relatively lean. If they're using it as fuel, goodness me, keep it. If they're not, if their VO2 max very plainly shows that their fat utilization is virtually non-existent, they are carb burners through and through, then maybe they should be lean. And I do say I still qualify that with a maybe. I would rather see them work to improve their fat utilization rather than try to circumvent that whole system. So, but and the more somebody is able to use different fuels at different intensities, the more metabolically flexible we call them. That's kind of the term in the literature. So, and that's what we want. We want lots of metabolic flexibility. If there are carbs in the system, great, we'll use the carbs. If there's fat around, great, we'll use the fat. So if the body is kind of agnostic and is able to employ these pathways in equal quantities or in to the same effect, then that makes a really versatile, good athlete.
And for somebody to become more metabolically flexible and to maybe improve their fat utilization through training and things, the pathways to do that are generally more flexibility would be improving your fitness and your output at a range of intensities and levels, I presume, but to increase the actual kind of fat adaptedness or fat oxidation, you'd be encouraging people to work at a lower intensity for longer periods of time, would you, to become more adapted to that pathway?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what their tests show. So, I mean, if their test shows, let's say, that up to 135 beats per minute, they're really good at burning fat. But then as soon as they get to 140, their fat utilization drops through the floor. It's still there. They're still using a little bit of fat, but it's really fallen off a lot. There's no reason that should happen. From an energy production, kind of the biochemistry of it all, there's no reason something should fall off a cliff like that. But what it sort of says is that their body is not trained in that specific area to utilize fat at that rate. So that gives us a very clear pointer, sort of saying, this is the intensity you need to now be spending a lot of time in. So if it's 140 beats per minute, and that might be a lot lower than they usually kind of run, then that's what it is. So put in the hours at 140 beats per minute, get your fat utilization at that rate better, and once you've got that, then over time we might be able to stretch it to 145, see what your body's capable of in a slightly at increasing levels of intensity.
So I'm just kind of thinking out loud with that. Would you, if you wanted someone at 140 beats per minute to be utilizing more fat in their training, would you reduce like things like sugars and things like that prior to training, so that they were then working at the 140 beats per minute and the body is almost forced to use an alternate fuel source rather than like you mentioned earlier, gels and things like that, you know what I mean? Because obviously you start taking that sort of thing off, and that's the stuff that's burnt most quickly off the top, isn't it? So is that how you would kind of suggest someone do it?
So those kind of like strategies for individual training runs, I just want to emphasize, this is all to be done in training. You don't want to be trying to do fasted races like it, but those kind of strategies can absolutely help. So training in a fasted state at a very particular heart rate may force your body to use a little bit more of the fatty acid utilization rather than using muscle glycogen or anything like that. So, and those kind of adaptations over time do kind of stick around. Like once the body realizes a pathway is there, it kind of tends to then use it. So so those kind of things can absolutely help along the way. When an athlete's taking kind of a long-term view of building up for next season or next year, that kind of thing, then we can absolutely do all of those things. And it's really exciting what an athlete can do in that given a bit of time.
Well, one of the things you have to remember when you're doing one of these long endurance races is, okay, of course, fueling yourself. But if you're really a carb burner and you don't have that fat utilization, then one of the things a lot of people experience is just gastrointestinal distress, and having to put in all those carbs and that food particularly like the ultra runners or the Ironman athletes, where they're doing like 12 hours or, whatever it is, 24-hour races, and you're constantly having to take on board sugar. People are just stopping and vomiting in order to continue, and obviously it has effects on their kind of going to the toilet during the race, which ultimately takes time off your off the race, and someone may overtake you.
Absolutely. And all of these things, if you're having to take on fuel during a race, even if you're able to withstand it, as you say, like the chances of gastric distress are raise a lot the more you take on. But even if you're able to take it on and tolerate it quite well, that is energy that is now going towards digesting that and getting it into the bloodstream. Energy that you could have been spending just plowing through your race instead.
Peter, you're super quiet. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because I did that 100-mile walk last year, and I felt really rubbish at the end of that because I was having to eat while I was walking as well, because it was a one-off, and yeah, what Paul was saying, it was just horrible. It was really horrible. Sorry, I was miles away there.
How long did it take? How long did it take you, Pete, to walk your 100 miles? Because that was a lot.
It was 40 hours in total,
and that was 40 hours non-stop.
It wasn't non-stop. No, I tried to, but it didn't work out like that over the weekend. I was knackered by hour 26, I think. So I stopped for 3 hours and then started again. But the thing of that is, training wise, I don't train like overly intensely. It's probably quite intense for a lot of people, but we've built up to it. We know this through training with Paul. We've built up to it, but with this, just walking, I can walk a decent amount quite easily. But when you like Owen's been saying, when you up the intensity of it, or you up the endurance of it, the length, then it just changes everything. And that was one of the big things.
You still walked non-stop for 26 hours.
Yeah.
And then you had 3 hours off, and then you walked again for.
Yeah, I was quite tired, so I had 3 hours off. Yeah.
and then you walked for another 11, 12 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that to walk for 26 hours, most people would. That's. How
many times did you change your socks?
I don't know if I did, You can't because as soon as you bend down, it changes. Like, as soon as you take your boots off or your shoes off or whatever, that's it. It's hard to get going again because you've got to get them back on. Your feet are swollen. But no, this was good though, because what's great about this is listening to Owen saying that everybody's different, because you get cross trainers and all of this sort of stuff, don't you? You get people trying to burn as many calories. We've talked about this before. People trying to burn as many calories as possible. So they go as intense as they can in the gym because they've only got half an hour. But the calories they'll have burnt is what they've just eaten. So then they just have to eat more. So they maybe haven't burnt any fat, depending on their type. And that everybody's different. So, you get cross trainers where you're on, it measures your heart rate and all that sort of stuff. It says you're in the fat burning zone. Mm-hmm. But who knows if you are or not, because it's all individual. So I think that's brilliant. It's like, it just shows that if you're doing something and it works based on what a machine's telling you, that's brilliant, fine. But if it's not working, you're not doing anything wrong, and it's probably worth going out and finding out what sort of stimulus your body reacts to, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is it. We have to remember that these machines, of course, they are based on averages, they're based on means of the population. Means are a big number at the front that hides a lot of individual complexity and individual variability. So the mean may not be appropriate.
And as we know, that's an average it's an average or mean of your population. But if you speak to people, nobody's in that. No. Which doesn't mathematically work out anyway, but that's how it goes, isn't it? Everyone else is like, oh, that's not me. Yeah. So there you go.
Right, I think we're gonna start to wrap up, guys, because I know Owen's got another appointment coming up and things. So Paul, did you have anything you'd like to kind of say as we start to wrap up?
I mean, I always thought the fat burning zone, you had to wear Lycra.
Oh.
The visions of like headbands and, you know.
These things all help, definitely.
I mean, it's all good to hear. I mean, the thing is when I started reading Phil Maffetone's work, 12, 13 years ago, all these kind of things he was talking about, and it wasn't as well known. A lot of people were doing that really high intensity work, interval sprints when they're trying to train for marathons and massive carb loading and things like this. And no one was actually thinking about what is happening in the body. What are the systems and what is the access of energy? And how do you train that specific system? And he obviously was doing that 40 odd years ago before we had access to this data. So now you're here being able to actually see it, and you're able to track it, and you can actually delve into it even deeper way. And I think for anyone who has a kind of performance mentality, it's not about training just hard. It is about trying to gain some insight into actually what your body needs and where its weaknesses and strengths are. So I think it's fascinating. I definitely think you should go and see Owen. There's a little plug for you there.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Pete, do you have anything you'd like to say in conclusion?
That was. I mean, I've just done it with the fact that everyone's different. I think for anyone listening to this, if you've like I say, if you've been doing something for a long period of time and it's not working, I mean, like for a year or so, like not for 20 years and it's not working, but like, when people say, I want to get in shape, I want to do this, I want to lose some body fat, whatever, and you're doing it for a year and it's not working, or even 6 months and it's not working, then look at something different until you find out what you've got, until you find out what works, because I've done that in the past, and I got to a point where I was basically just chucking kettlebells around every day, and nothing was happening. I wasn't progressing anywhere. I wasn't getting any worse. I was just staying exactly static. And it was like, right, that was when I needed to change focus, and everything, all numbers have just gone through the roof since then. So, and that was lucky, because obviously I found something I enjoy doing, and I can do it very easily at home and all that sort of stuff. So if people can find something like that, because lots of people think I need to go running, and they'll start running, and I did that and I hated it. And I spent a vast part of my life, when was it, from 2007 till about 2011, 4 years just running, and it was horrible. I hated every minute of it. So
So you hate 5K,
I lost a load of weight, but I was weak as hell. So it's find what's good for you, and go and see Owen, and he'll tell you what's good for you.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Owen, if people want to follow you, want to get in touch, want to see more about what you do and how you do it, what's the best platform and way for people to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, our Instagram is at myvitalmetrics. That's probably where we're most active as far as social media goes, and the website, of course, is just myvitalmetrics.com. Yes, all of our kind of tests are kind of laid out and fully explained in that. And if you want kind of things like sample reports and to really see what you're going to get, just get in touch, and I'll send those along. And but like I said, I mean, at the beginning, like there's all kinds of reasons that someone might take on any of these tests, and they come, we've talked about performance today, we talked about health last time, and often those things cross over, so
excellent. And I'd highly recommend. I've been to Owen twice myself, and a number of the members of Unique Results have been to see Owen now. And universally, they've come back saying what a good experience they had, what a nice setup he's got there, what a nice bloke he is, and also how comfortable you made everyone feel. So I've sent, men and women of all ages and sizes and shapes to you, and they've all come back saying it was a great experience. So I'd really recommend, if you are anywhere near London, check out My Vital Metrics. It's about 5 minutes walk from Liverpool Street Station. Very easy to get to. Thank you so much, Owen, for joining us again, and thank you to all listeners. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you can leave a review on the platform you're on. We do have guests lined up. This was episode 96. So we have guests lined up right the way through to episode 100, which will be coming in a few weeks. So do keep following us. Do keep involved. If you'd like to join into the Facebook group, just go onto Facebook, in group, search Health Oddity, and we will let you in. And we will see you next week for episode 97. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.